God bless fantasy football. There are many things a man can do with his time, and this is better than those things.
Fantasy football, good attitude. Fantasy football, good attitude. Fantasy football, good attitude. Fantasy football, good attitude. Fantasy football, good. Touchdown.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Goon podcast. Fantasy Football Goon is a part of the Bears Barroom Radio Network. I'm your host, Joe Mandel, the Goon, and we are going to get you ready for your draft and teach you all about draft strategy. Joining me as always is my co-host and good buddy, John Santucci, who I call Tooch. And then we also have a special guest, Bears Barroom Draft Analyst and Scouting Director for InsideTheLeague.com, Danny Shimon. Danny and Tooch, thank you for joining me today, guys.
What's up, guys?
Great to talk fantasy football, Joe.
Yeah, we're ready for our drafts, and we're kind of getting you guys ready for your draft. And we're basically going to give you draft strategy here and kind of a lot of questions that we have moving into the season. So with that said, let's just jump right into it, boys. Danny, quick question for you on the top of the show here. Do you keep a list of players that you look to target in certain parts of the draft, or do you just kind of go for best available?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a list of guys that I like to stash. Typically, if we're talking 12 to 15 round format, right, standard formats in most leagues, I like to take gambles on guys later on in the rounds. I'd like to get my starters all set, at least one key starter each position. Assuming, the skill position, running back, receiver, stuff like that, we're going to have two or sometimes three starters. I like to get one or two starters there. And then in the, like say the 10, 11, 12th round, I think guys with, coming off of suspensions, guys who are questionable possibly because of injuries, for example, guys like Josh Gordon,
sure.
Mark Ingram probably will go higher than in that round because, he's a pretty good player, but he's got 4 games at the beginning of the season. So maybe some guys will let him pass down. So maybe you can grab him later on in the rounds. Martavis Bryant is only one puff away from being suspended for the whole year. So, he's a guy I always have, if he's available, those later parts of the round of the draft, I try to grab him. Guys like Julian Edelman, if you're in a PPR league, this kid, is coming back from that knee injury. So he's a guy who was PPR gold. And then, of course, Packers running back Aaron Jones, who coming out of UTEP was a guy I liked coming out of college. And, when the Packers got him last year, and he proved it, but of course, he got suspended. But he's a guy also that if I can get him in the later rounds of the draft, guys like that are guys I target. But, of course, I'm giving away all my secrets here because we're having a draft this weekend.
Yeah, we are.
You guys are getting, guys have all my notes here now, so.
Yeah, well, the good thing is we're all in the same league, so we can't possibly all have the same strategy. It would kind of go off the rails really quickly. But John and I always take our kickers last. Are you a last round kicker guy?
It all depends on the type of format you have, right? So I'm in 2 leagues. Going to be joining a 3rd league. So on one of my leagues, our kickers, field goals matter, right? So
sure.
Field goals, I believe it's 35 and in is 3 points, 35 to 40 yards is 4, 40 to 45 is 5, so on and so forth. So, kickers who can make those, long kicks, 15 plus, the guys with big legs, those guys matter. But still, I still wait until about the, that's a 15-round draft in that league. So I wait about the 11th, 12th round for those. I do not go kicker, definitely not before my 12 rounds. No way I go kicker that early.
Yeah, for sure. And, John and I always talk about dome kickers, and that's something I always target, are guys that don't have to fight the elements. Are you on board with that too?
Yeah, I mean, if any kicker kicking in a nice climate or in a dome stadium is always, guys you'd like to target. But a lot of times, Robbie Gould was an exception to that rule, right? He kicked in Soldier Field in some of the worst conditions, and he was always good as gold, right? They say, right? So, unfortunately, he's no longer a kicker for the Bears. But there are some kickers who are pretty good with controlling the elements in terms of their kicks and not letting them, letting the elements bother them in performing their job. So. But generally, I like to go with the guys who belong to a big strike offense, a big play offense. Those guys usually end up getting not only the extra points, but also getting, more so in field goal position to make field goals. So the Matt Bryants, guys like that who are part of a big play offense.
Yeah,
Right.
and kickers do matter more than people say. So especially depending on your league format, and the same could be said about defenses. John, I know you are always torn on this. What's your concept, John, on where you take a defense?
Well, like I said, people have been picking their defenses early, and it depends on the point scoring system, of course. If you have a lot of points for defensive actions, plays, and scores. I had Jacksonville last year and I think I picked him up off waivers when I had a bye week of my first defense. No one had picked up Jacksonville right away last year. There was times that they had like 30-point weeks, 30 points. So I'm seeing defenses drafted 7, 8, 9 right now, the good ones at least. And I'm talking about Minnesota, Jacksonville, Philadelphia. If you miss out on those like top 3 or 4, Danny, do you tend to wait?
Yeah, and 7, 8, 9 is still for me is too high to pick a defense, and I agree with you in terms of the format. There are some formats in some leagues where defenses do matter. If they hold opponents to a certain amount of yardage, amount of sacks, tackles, so on and so forth. But 7, 8, 9, you're still looking at top position players, guys who can get you a lot more points than defense can on a weekly basis. So that's still too high for me. If I miss out on the top defenses, to answer your question, I go on and I kind of scour towards end of the draft. Teams that are you might have a defense that's up and coming, improving. Maybe like the Bucs this year, and take a look at their schedule, see where they're playing, especially early on in the season. A lot of times with these defenses units, once they get rolling, right, if they get a couple of games at the beginning of the year, you'll see them pick up momentum and kind of develop that swagger like the Jaguars did. And the Jaguars are a talented defense.
Yep.
But once they started, pummeling opponents at the beginning of the season, their confidence grew, and next thing you know, they became a monster. So, teams like that with the young talent that's up and coming, that's developing, like a team like the Bears. I know the Bears are being mocked in some drafts. I saw 8th, 9th round. That's a bit too high for me. I still like to see them, pick up the turnover pace. But definitely a team like the Bears, they're the second year, or they continue their development under Fangio. They have second-year players that are growing, the safeties and corners and rush linemen. So, teams like that, I like to kind of scour, if I can, get them in the later rounds and strike gold. And then you mentioned you picked them up, the Jaguars, off of waivers. Waivers are very important, especially for defenses and kickers.
Oh, yeah. We constantly play the waiver wire all year long. Like I said, John last year got the Jaguars, and there's been a ton of great players that people have gotten off of waivers throughout the years. And the year Arian Foster broke out, he was probably not drafted in many leagues or towards the very end. So there's always gems to be found on waivers. So it's important to keep an eye on them throughout the season. And don't discount the value of the waiver wire. It's very, very important. So moving on to our next question here. A lot of people ask me this throughout the year. Where do you draft a tight end? And once you miss out on those top 3, how long do you wait? Personally, for me, the top 3 guys being Gronk, Travis Kelce, and Zach Ertz, those are guys that are probably going to go in the tail end of the first or in the second. But after you miss those guys, Danny, where do you pick those middle of the line tight ends up? For me, it's like the 7th or 8th round. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. 7th, 8th round, 9th round is where I would be looking for those players if I miss on those top 3, and we agree on the top 3. I have the same top 3 listed for my tight ends. But in terms of the next 3 or the guys I'd be looking, guys like Evan Ingram from the Giants. Yeah. And I know the Giants have a loaded offense this year, but, don't discount him. This kid is basically another receiver in a tight end's body. And so the other guy is obviously Greg Olsen. I'm assuming getting a bounce back year from him. He keep coming off that injury. I think he's always been solid. He's always been Cameron's top target generally when healthy. So I think he's a guy I'm still looking to target in those 7th, 8th, 9th rounds. And a guy that goes flying on the radar every year, but Kyle Rudolph from Minnesota. This guy, he's not flashy. He doesn't make the big 20-yard, 30-yard catches on the field, but he's constantly scoring 7, 8 touchdowns a season. Averaging 4 to 5 receptions a game, So that's another guy that I would look in that area. And now with the Vikings seemingly improving on offense,
Right.
he's a guy who looked to get more targets, because remember, Kirk Cousins' favorite target and one of his favorite targets in Washington was Jordan Reed. So I like to have Kyle Rudolph come back, have a pretty big year this year.
Well, if Jordan Reed is healthy this year, I know he seems like he's still got some injury issues, but he's a guy that's flying under the radar, because of injury. And
that's the only reason why, because of injury. Yeah. When that guy's healthy, he produces. Also, he lost his quarterback, so now he's got to develop his chemistry with Alex Smith. So, Alex Smith came from an offense where he relied heavily on his tight end, Travis Kelce. So he assumed that, Smith and Reed will pick up right where Reed and Cousins left off. So we'll see there. But like you said, if Reed stays healthy, he's always a top-notch fantasy player.
Yeah, he's burned me too many times, Danny. I've given up on Jordan Reed. He's burned me so many times. He's such a talented guy. I just can't trust him in fantasy anymore.
You just got to get a reliable backup. That's all you got to do when you get Jordan Reed.
That's right.
Yeah, reliable backup. Because you never know when he'll pull a hamstring or a quad muscle and he's out for 2 or 3 weeks. He's got to, But when he kills you is when he gets injured, mid-game or early first quarter, and he's out for the rest of the game.
Oh.
He kills you for that week.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done this song and dance with Jordan Reed. But another guy that's kind of flying under the radar this year, Danny, is Blake Jarwin in Dallas. What are your thoughts on Blake Jarwin?
Blake Jarwin from the Cowboys?
Yes.
I haven't really. I mean, the guy I like from the Cowboys actually is a rookie, Dalton Schultz from Stanford.
Okay.
In terms of, I think he's a guy who's a late round pick, and I think a guy who can probably come in and play not saying a leading role, but a pivotal role for them on that offensive when taking over for Jason Witten. But in terms of, Blake Jarwin, haven't really looked into him that much.
Sure.
My main guy, I know their starter right now going into the season was Jeff Swain. Mm-hmm. And then Rico Gathers having a pretty good training camp as well. So, but Dalton Schultz is a guy that intrigues me for the Cowboys. Is a guy probably. You're probably not going to draft him out, I would assume. You're probably going to keep an eye on, and maybe in a waiver wire. But yeah, so of the Cowboys' current tight ends, I got Jeff Swain, Rico Gathers, and Dalton Schultz are guys on my radar.
Okay, yeah.
And Dalton Schultz, a Stanford guy like Austin Hooper, another good tight end. But the tight ends always seem to shine in Baltimore, Danny. Who do you think is going to be the top tight end in Baltimore? I really like this kid, Hayden Hurst. I just see him having a Dennis Pitta type season this year. This kid's a really good player.
The hype around Hayden Hurst coming out of college was something that I didn't get personally, to be honest with you. I watched his tape. The guy's a great athlete, a former pitcher. He was drafted to play baseball. But the thing I didn't see him as a first-round tight end. Now, he gives effort when he blocks, but of course in fantasy we really don't care about blocking. He's a pretty good receiver, but he's more of a straight line runner. He's not a guy who can go up and get the ball and make plays yards after contact. From what I saw, the kid I like in Baltimore, believe it or not, I believe they went in the 3rd round, and that's a kid from Oklahoma, Mark Andrews.
Yep.
Tight end.
That's a guy Joe likes.
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield. This kid, not a blocker. Again, we don't care about blocking in fantasy, but this kid is a natural pass catcher. He knows how to run routes, how to set up defensive backs to get them break outside with a stutter move, with his head and his feet, and then breaks inside, gets the inside leverage, and gets open for a touchdown. So this is the kid I think won in the 3rd round. I think if he was a better blocker, I think he would have gone higher. Personally, I liked him better coming out of college than Hayden Hurst. I know I'm in a minority on that. But that's the guy in Baltimore that I would like is Mark Andrews.
So you think he'll come out on top, right then, Danny, in Baltimore? Because they love to use the tight end.
I think they do. They'll run a lot of 2 or 3 tight end sets. Remember, they still have Max Williams, a former 2nd-round pick, still on the roster. So if he makes the team, they still have Nick Boyle, and then of course Andrews and Hurst as well. So they have a number of tight ends on the roster. So I'm assuming they're going to keep probably 4 tight ends on the roster. So I would think probably the veteran Boyle or Williams might be starting, but eventually I believe Mark Andrews will be a top tight end on the team.
They got a tight end in the front office too, Danny.
Yep, one of the best to do it. Ozzie Newsome.
What about in Denver, Danny? Who's going to be the tight end in Denver?
See, Denver was a team I've gone back and forth on. I like some of the weapons, but then I don't like some of the weapons. So I think Case Keenum, the one we saw last year, the quarterback we saw last year, I think that might be the real Case Keenum. Coming out of Houston, he was always a quarterback. He was just, his traits weren't NFL quality, right? He was shorter than most. His arm wasn't the strongest. But he has an ability. He understands the passing game. He has an ability to throw receivers open. So, looking at their offensive firepower, with the receivers and Sanders and the rookie Cortland Sutton, and as well as Demaryius Thomas, I think they have some firepower on the outside. Where a guy we forget that he was drafted last year, Jake Butt, the kid from Michigan, tore his ACL. I believe it was in the bowl game. Missed a majority, if not all, of his rookie year last year. And this kid was a very good tight end in college, and I think he's got a chance to develop into a pretty serviceable starter, if not a high quality starter in Denver. So the other guy I like is Troy Fugamali from Wisconsin, another rookie. But if I had to make a bet right now as far as the tight end on Denver that I would select, it'd probably be Jake Butt.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Jake Butt as well. John and I talked about him a little bit earlier this offseason. So tight end's a very delicate situation there, and for a lot of teams in the league. But so is running back. There's a lot of backfields that are kind of a toss-up as we speak, and the first one that kind of comes to my mind right now is Seattle. Rashad Penny broke his finger. He's out for 2 to 3 weeks. Who's going to be the lead dog in Seattle?
I think going into the season, it's going to be Chris Carson. So I think he's going to be the starter. I had Rashard Penny probably as a backup eventually, overtaking Carson. I would assume he was a first-round pick. The teams usually want to get these guys onto the field, sooner rather than later. So I assumed Carson was going to start, but I think Penny would be the guy who would just take over. A guy that really has disappointed me over the years in Seattle is C.J. Prosise. Coming out of Notre Dame, I thought this kid had, top-level starter written all over him, and he just hasn't produced, unfortunately, whether it's injuries or the system. Offensive line in front of him hasn't been the greatest as well. So, but yeah, I mean, going into the season, I think Chris Carson will be the starter. I know that they said Penny's out 3 to 4 weeks, but they expect him to be available week 1. So, but I don't think they're going to start Penny off right away. I think they're going to go with Chris Carson and then eventually work in Rashard Penny. But towards the end of the season, though, he could be the starter, though. Penny, that is.
Yeah, my favorite running back by committee, of course, I'm sarcastically saying my favorite, but is New England, Danny. What do you think about the 3-headed, 4-headed, 5-headed monster in New England?
I don't even touch those guys, man. I mean, I like New England guys. I don't touch because you don't know who they're going to start, or whoever. Some guy will start every single game, but he won't get that most snaps. So we'll go with James White, or he'll go with in the past he's gone with LeGarrette Blount, and so this year they got Jeremy Hill, James White. Sonny Michel, the rookie that I like coming out of college, is hurt, and there's conflicting reports whether he'll be ready for week 1. Some might say he might miss half the season. So who knows what's going on there? So I mean, if I had to be pinned down to pick a running back for New England, if I'm in a standard scoring league, I'm going Jeremy Hill. If I'm in a PPR league, I go James White.
Yeah, it's a funky backfield. We tell people to pretty much avoid it, like you said. But if you're in a deep league, you kind of need to grab somebody. So yeah, it's a tough backfield there. There's a lot of tough backfields. I mean,
Bill Belichick hates fantasy football, Joe.
Yeah,
I think Belichick hates a lot of things.
He hates everything. He's got a frown on his face most of the time. But I know we were talking a little bit about Tampa Bay's improved defense, but who's going to be the main ball carrier there?
Rookie Ronald Jones out of USC. That guy, he might not start the season as a starter, but I think eventually that guy's going to take over. He's got big playability written all over him. He's a pretty good pass catcher out of the backfield. He's not a big, powerful back, but he's a guy, once he gets past, he's got a good burst. Once he gets past the line of scrimmage, he gets into the open field, into the second and third levels of defense. He has the ability to just separate from defenders. So I think he's a big play guy. that's eventually going to take over as the Bucks starting running back.
Yeah, they've been a frustrating backfield for a while, but they are improving. So I know we kind of have to wait and see, but I agree with you there. Now, Washington had a catastrophic injury last week when they lost Darius Geis for the season.
Yeah.
They have an interesting backfield situation. Who do you see emerging as the lead dog?
Assuming this player comes back healthy, I think Chris Thompson is going to start off the season. I mean, he was on a roll last year before he got injured.
Yeah, he was.
Both catching passes out of the backfield and running the ball, surprisingly. So I think if he's healthy, I think he goes in as a starter. But Rob Kelly is always that pipe there to steal some goal line carries from Thompson. And then, we always forget that Samaje Perine is on there, the kid from Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
A kid who's, coming out of college was a pretty good running back. So hasn't done much in the pros when given the chance. So, he's going into his, I believe, his third season or his second season. But he's a kid that, actually second season. So he's a kid that I think can take the next leap and actually start improving and putting up some more yards. But going into the season, you got to go with Chris Thompson, assuming he's healthy. But if you're looking for a guy with the goal line carries, you're probably looking at either Kelly or Samaje Perine there.
Okay.
And Rob Kelly in phenomenal shape, I heard. Lighter and faster.
What, we can't call him Fat Rob anymore?
We can't call him Fat Rob anymore.
Come on, I was one of the best nicknames out there.
Hey, maybe you can call your fantasy team that now.
Fat Rob.
John, I know you had a few more backfields you wanted to ask about.
What about Philadelphia? Jay Ajayi, they picked him up last season and didn't play him as much as you kind of thought if you were had him on your fantasy squad. And then, of course, Darren Sproles returning. Corey Clement really played well in the playoffs. So, I mean, that's another backfield that's kind of up in the air. What do you think, Danny?
Right. I think going in, Jay Ajayi's got to get the starter. He's a guy that's proven he can, move the chains, kind of like a LeGarrette Blount, if you will. That's why that trade kind of didn't make sense to me because I feel like him and LeGarrette Blount were kind of similar. But then Corey Clement, in terms of catching the ball out of the backfield, really surprised me. Coming out of college, he wasn't known as a guy who could catch the ball out of the backfield. So his ability to make plays, sneaking out of the backfield was really, really impressive. So I think those two guys go in. Of course, the reliable veteran Darren Sproles is still there. He's coming back off an injury, and then the rookie from Notre Dame, Josh Adams, is a guy that also might get some carries. But going in the top three, I think going to be Ajayi, Clement, and Sproles in that order.
Jay Ajayi not really known for receiving skills, so Corey
Correct.
Clement get like the third down role, or is that still going to be Sproles?
Well, it depends, right? So if Sproles is back 100%, how do you keep Sproles off the field? So, but Clement did pretty good job, like I said, filling in for Sproles at that third down back, if you will, last year. So I think Ajayi and Clement going as 1-2, and then Sproles gets sprinkled in, whether it's third downs or on just gadget plays or just on special teams strictly. But I think that the top guy going in, if you want to draft a starter, you draft Jay Ajayi.
Right. And I have a feeling he's going to be overdrafted this year, but I could be wrong. The team I always seems to they really could use a running game. I know you talked about Case Keenum earlier, and it's Denver. Who's going to carry the rock in Denver?
That's a good one. The guy I think is going to start the season as the starter will be Devontae Booker. He was a draft pick a couple of years ago. Hasn't really panned out as much as I think the Broncos expected him to be. But I think Royce Freeman, the rookie. You guys see a trend here with me? I like a lot of rookies. I'm the scout guy.
I do too. I like the rookies this year too. In fact, mock drafts, I've been drafting so many rookies. I'm like, do I have a problem?
Yeah. So that's the thing. Rookies, of course, they have nothing to fall back on other than a collegiate career. So it is a bit of a gamble, but you can always go off of what the guy did in college, the traits he displayed on film, and how he fits in the system. And I think with Denver's system, I think Royce Freeman is a pretty good fit. So Booker will be given ample opportunity to claim and hold the job down. But I think Freeman eventually can sneak in runs there and eventually could take over the starting position. Again, a lot of these places we're talking about here don't have one cement, rock concrete starter going in. So that's why there are a bunch of names being thrown out here because there's no one there. And that's why, most of the league now, right, is run by committee. It's so hard with fantasy to nail down your starters because you don't even know who these teams are going to start on a weekly basis, much less who you're going to start on your fantasy lineups.
Yeah, that's a
Right. While we're talking about running backs, what do you think of the zero running back strategy, Danny? I know this year is probably not a good year. With like you're just talking about, it's hard to tell what running backs to go with. But what do you think of that strategy?
The zero running back strategy. I'm not sure what that is. I haven't come across that before. What is it? Zero running back strategy?
It's where you don't really draft one until the later rounds, I think, right, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, it's only come around, like, I only heard about it for the first time last year. Some people loading up on other positions. For me, it's something I would never do, but I'm curious to see what Danny's take is on it.
Right. No, my thing is if you have a starting running back, if you got a guy who's going to be starter, is going to be the lead dog for that team, and they have a semi decent offense, you draft them in the first round because those running backs are scarce and they're hard to find. Now, if you are in a PPR league, I can see you maybe waiting, towards the second, third, fourth rounds, maybe to get a guy who gets a lot of passes out of the backfield. Like I remember, like one year I was hurting and I was in PPR league. I think I lost 2 starters and I picked up Danny Woodhead, and he was phenomenal for me because it was a PPR league. I got points for all the receptions. He was always getting yardage in terms of receiving yards, more so than rushing yards, and so he helped me out that year. So it all depends, but to go zero running backs in the first couple rounds, I think that is risky. I wouldn't do it personally.
Yeah, I agree.
It's craziness, John.
The first 5 picks have been, most of the first round is just everybody grabbing all of the running backs who are, basically the show and on their respective teams. Then kind of, Antonio Brown and DeAndre Hopkins are sprinkled in there, but for the most part, the first round, from what I've seen in practicing for our draft on Saturday, has been running backs.
Right, you got to go running backs because, like I said, there are so many limited number of running backs that we know are starters. The guys are going to get the bulk of the carries for a team. That you got to guide those guys up. The Le'Veon Bells, the Todd Gurley's, the Jordan Howards, Ezekiel Elliott's. Those guys, you got to grab those guys early in the first round. Because later on, you're going to come across these guys. Some of these situations we're talking about. We're talking about the guys in Denver, Devontae Booker. We're talking guys, Jeremy Hill in New England. Guys who are not guaranteed of getting 15 or 20 carries a game. When you have those guys are gold. That's why they go right off the board early part of round 1.
Hey, so Phil in our league said he's going to be taking Jordan Howard first overall. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll believe it when I see it. But if he does, then he's a man of his word because he says Jordan Howard's an elite running back and he takes number 1 overall, then he's a man of his words. But I'll believe it when I'll see it. I'll believe it when I'll see it. That's what I was trying to say. So we'll see what happens there. The shadow should be interesting.
But he's got the first pick overall, so.
Right? So he has no excuse. He's got to take him number 1. And I got number 2. So I'm waiting for him to take Jordan Howard number 1.
You're probably begging him.
I'm a Jordan Howard fan. I don't know if I'm a big fan as Phil is, but I'm a Jordan Howard fan, though.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm a Jordan Howard fan, too. I don't think you can't not take Todd Gurley at first, but or Le'Veon Bell. Either of those guys are interchangeable, but Jordan Howard's going to have a great year, too. So, I think I'm sitting at 6th pick or something like that, so I'd be more than happy to grab him there.
Right, if he makes it up to you. Yep.
Yeah.
Especially, the one thing that hurts Howard, and it's always going to hurt Howard until he proves it's all wrong, is PPR leagues, right? He's not a big guy who catches balls out of the backfield. Until he proves us he can, he'll always have that knock on him in terms of not being able to catch passes out of the backfield or doing it consistently week in, week out.
Yeah, Howard's. I think he's going to take a step this year, but we have to wait and see on that front. Speaking of guys getting injured, I know we were talking about that a little before. Jerick McKinnon had a calf muscle strain, so it sounds like he's going to be out for a while. What do you think about San Francisco's backfield with McKinnon kind of up in the air at the moment?
Man, looking at McKinnon and his backup, Matt Breida is also injured. So I mean that backfield, going in right now is pretty much up for grabs and is one that if I could, I would stay away from.
Yeah.
Obviously, if healthy, McKinnon is the guy there. They paid him a lot of money to be the starter, and I think he's a perfect fit for Shanahan's offense in terms of both being able to catch balls out of the backfield in PPR leagues and also carrying the ball in that outside zone running scheme. So Breida is more of more of a bigger back, a guy who can get in between the tackles and get those short yardage stuff. They also signed Alfred Morris, the veteran, this past week, I believe. So he's also been thrown into that fray. But if I could stay away from the 49ers backfield, I will try to stay away from them. But if I had to pick someone, I'd go with Jerick McKinnon, because I think he's scheduled to be back for week 1. So, obviously I wouldn't count on him as being my starter. If I could get him and stash him on the bench and see how it plays out through the season. But yeah, if I had to pick someone from that backfield, I'd probably go Jerick McKinnon.
All right, yeah, it's a developing situation, so obviously we got to keep our eye on what happens with McKinnon. But if you draft him,
Jimmy Garoppolo will do, Danny. Jimmy G.
I think Jimmy will have a fine season. I'm not one of the group that are anointing him one of the best quarterbacks in this league. I definitely think he's playing for the right coach and in the right system. That system is going to, his skill set is going to shine in that system. The quick release, the ability to quickly read defense and get rid of the ball, get it into the hands of his playmakers is going to play right into his strengths. So I think he's going to have a successful career with the 49ers. Will he be one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL? He's got a chance, but it's still too early for me to anoint him one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, which apparently a lot of these, talking heads already called him one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm pumping the brakes on that. I'm not there yet, but he's got a chance. He's got a very good chance.
Yeah,
he's got some good targets for sure.
Yeah, 49ers have done a nice job building that roster. John Lynch, specifically with Pierre Garçon, Marquise Goodwin outside. I like Dante Pettis, another rookie, surprise, a receiver out there. And so we'll see how it goes, but definitely a guy, Jimmy Garoppolo. I picked him last year. As soon as I heard the trade was done from New England to 49ers, I went on the waiver wire and I claimed him because I knew he was the perfect fit in that Shanahan system. It was just a matter of him getting in there, learning the offense, and then being able to play. And play he did towards the end of the season.
I did the same thing. I picked him up and he took me to the championship. So. Yeah, Jimmy G had a great end of his season for sure. And John, what were you going to say? I cut you off.
I was going to say, I know Danny used to talk about rookie running backs this season. We had a couple great rookie running backs last season. I'm talking about Kareem Hunt and Alvin Kamara. Any regression, sophomore slump effect on either of those guys, you think, Danny?
The only thing about Kareem Hunt is he's got, Pat Mahomes now as his quarterback. So I assume teams are going to go ahead and probably early on stack the box and let Mahomes prove that he can beat defenses, that is. But other than that, I mean, what I saw from Kareem Hunt last year was pretty impressive, and I think he's the real deal out there in KC. Alvin Kamara is a guy who surprised me. I mean, he was a kid at Tennessee had always split, carries in the backfield. Definitely was a pretty good receiver out of the backfield. Ran routes pretty well when he was lined up in the slot or even split out wide at times at Tennessee. But his breakout season last year really took me by storm because the guy in one of my leagues who won our league is mainly because he rode Alvin Kamara all throughout the season and into the playoffs and championship game, and he picked him up off of waivers. So what I give credit to Kamara's success last year was the offensive play calling and the scheming of the head coach, Sean Payton. He put him in situations where he was able to succeed both offensively and play off of the starter, Mark Ingram. So with Ingram being out for the first 4 games of the season, obviously the spotlight's going to be on Kamara this year. So could he digress a little bit? Possibly, but I think he's got a pretty good offensive mind there as head coach who will eventually get him his touches, especially if you got him in a PPR league. I think, he might not hit the marks he hit last year, but he's going to get close to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kamara, I'm in the boat with you about Kamara. I think his stats will stay very similar, but I think he had a ridiculous amount of touchdowns last year, like 15 or something. I expect that to go down, but overall, I think he's still a great pick.
Especially if you're in a PPR league.
Oh, yeah.
First round pick?
Ooh, good question. First round pick, right? So if you're in a deep league, you have 12 guys, PPR league, I could see him going. I could see him going first round, especially he'll be the starter for the first 4 weeks. Maybe you can handcuff him with Mark Ingram, towards the 5th, 6th, 7th round, something like that. If Ingram lasts that long, yeah, I could see him going towards the bottom half of the first round. Sure.
How long is Ingram suspended for?
4 games.
Yeah, 4 games.
Okay, I thought it was only 2, but Edelman is suspended for 2 games, I think, right? Or is he 4 also?
Edelman, I believe. Let me see. Edelman, I have it in my notes here somewhere. He's also 4 games. PEDs.
4 games also. Okay, so
yeah,
that leaves some targets on New England for Philip Dorsett, maybe. Finally see him come out.
Philip Dorsett, maybe Eric Decker. They just picked him up. Pretty good, veteran receiver. Chris Hogan is a guy who I love that pickup when the Patriots got him last year. So I feel Dorsett is a guy that coming out of college, he was electrifying in terms of his speed, the ability to stretch a defense, but he really has not shown the ability to get off a jam, to play within the slot a lot. So we'll see. He still has to prove something to me, but if you're taking a late round flyer on a receiver or a guy you're gonna just highlight and trying to keep an eye on, possibly the first or second week of the waiver wire pickups, he's a guy I would definitely put down there. But in terms of wasting a pick on him, too early for me to go that route right now.
Right, I got another guy who was injured almost most of last season. Was a very high draft pick. And he was a monster in college. We're talking about Mike Williams on the Chargers.
I know you're not going there. Mike Williams.
This is a guy. He's got to just break out. Sooner or later. What do you think?
Well, he's going to have to fight for some touches now. I mean, the guy I loved on the Chargers, and I loved him come out of college, was Keenan Allen. But the problem with Keenan Allen is he cannot stay healthy. Last year I think he stayed healthy for the first time, and I can't remember the last time, and he had a monster season.
Yeah.
This guy is a legitimate number 1 receiver. He always week in and week out would go up against top cornerbacks, and he'd actually win those battles. So, with him, Tyrell Williams, unfortunately their tight end Hunter Henry got hurt, but the Chargers have some weapons, and that's why you see a lot of these predictions here for the Chargers winning that division because of the offensive firepower they have with Phillip Rivers there. So, Mike Williams coming in was an injury risk coming into the draft. Obviously, that proved to be the case. But his ability is, he doesn't stretch the defense. He doesn't really separate that much. But what he can do is he can go up and get the ball. He's got a big catch radius. So, for him, it won't be more so, between the 20s, but more so what he does, what he produces in the end, in the red zone. Those jump balls, 50 balls, go up there, he gets it. Especially he's getting one-on-one coverage. On the outside, that's where he's going to produce most. But he's going to have to battle for touches out there in Los Angeles.
Well, Hunter Henry went down. That was a big blow. So there might be some touches to go around there. But we'll see. Who's going to be the top tight end in San Diego? Are they going to call Antonio Gates back, or is it going to be Virgil Green?
I heard that they were in negotiations with Antonio Gates, but I didn't see anything in terms of them signing him or anything official. But I think going in, it's Virgil Green is a starter, currently on the depth chart. So I think that's to be determined. But if you bring in a guy like Antonio Gates, the only question is how much does he have left, right?
Right.
So is he a guy that even worth going after? Virgil Green is a guy I can see possibly as like a bi-week replacement maybe, but not someone I would pencil in as a starter in my lineup. So. But because they have those weapons on the outside that we talked about, Keenan Allen, Tyrell Williams, Travis Benjamin, Mike Williams, they even got a kid from Texas Tech, Dylan Cantrell, that's pretty that's making some moves and some pretty impressive games so far in practices in the preseason. So they have a lot of weapons out there, and plus we haven't talked about their backfield. Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, he's going to catch a lot of balls.
Right, and then Northwestern's very own Justin Jackson's out there as well. And then you also have Austin Eckler, a guy who also catch balls out of the backfield. So, there's plenty of mouths to feed in Los Angeles on the Chargers roster. So I don't know if tight end's at top of that list yet.
Yeah, I think it's a waiver wire wait and see there. I agree. There's a lot
of the Chargers defense, Danny.
Yes,
takes a step up this year. Or?
I like the Chargers defense a lot. Bosa, love Joey Bosa. Obviously, Melvin Ingram came into his own. You know, the linebackers are, with Denzel Perryman and Jatavis Brown. Love, Casey Hayward, the corner. And then they got the Derwin James, the rookie out of Florida State, who's also, a guy who can make big plays, not only, physically in the run game, but also in coverage. So I think the Chargers are a defense. If you miss out on those top, top defenses, the Chargers could be, remember we were talking about earlier with the Jaguars, right? A team that's building a lot of young talent, and all of a sudden they came together, became really good, get on a roll, start rolling. So Chargers defense is one defense you can always, kind of pencil back in there as a team that you might, if you don't get them in the top round, in the top half of the round with all the good defenses are going, those are defenses that you can always fall back on. Chargers are one of them.
Yeah, the Chargers defense is going to take a step up this year. And right before that, we were talking about mouths to feed in some offenses, and two guys that got fed quite a bit last year were Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. Who do you think out of those two guys ends up being the head guy with Kirk Cousins throwing the ball?
That's a good question. Because Stephon Diggs got the big new contract, so you expect him to be the top receiver there. But I had Adam Thielen on one of my PPR leagues, and he was gold. He's a must start every week for me. So
yeah,
man, that's going to be that's going to be a tough one, because obviously you don't know the chemistry right now between Kirk Cousins and any of these receivers. I mean, if you're in a PPR league, I'd say you go Adam Thielen. But if you're in a standard, scoring format league, I think Stephon Diggs gives you bigger plays. So I guess it all going to kind of depend on which league you're in and the formats you guys are running.
Sure, and I think they're both quality options regardless, especially with Kirk Cousins. I mean, he looked really good in that preseason action last week. I can't imagine he's going to see too much time on the field before the season starts, but what are your expectations out of Kirk Cousins this year?
Just for the record, I am not a big Kirk Cousins fan. Not coming out of Michigan State or what he did with the Redskins. I really didn't buy into the Kirk Cousins hype. There's a reason why the team that drafted him didn't want to pay him, and I agree with he's not a top tier starting quarterback. Is he an NFL quarterback? Serviceable starting quarterback, I guess you could say that. So just to kind of put it out there, I'm not a big Kirk Cousins fan. If Kirk Cousins replicates what Case Keenum did last year, I think that'll be a plus for the Vikings. And if that's the case, again, Thielen would be my guy for PPR leagues, and Diggs would be my guy in a standard league. But in terms of Kirk Cousins, I would not rely on him as a quality starter week in and week out.
All right, yeah, that's there's been so much
surprising. Yeah,
it's kind of refreshing to hear that.
Phillip Rivers or Kirk Cousins?
Phillip Rivers.
You can't beat that consistency year after year.
Well, he's got better weapons around him, I think, in terms of receivers. We just went over the Chargers, receiving core. Plus, he's been in that same system, for all these, years. He's that leader there. Kirk Cousins just got paid a big contract. He's under enormous pressure to come into a team, because he's been called the missing link to a championship team. If they get off to a slow start, the boos are going to come out, and he's a guy that listens to what all the naysayers out there are saying. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's got a couple of burner accounts on Twitter and he follows all these people on what they're talking about him, because if you notice in Washington, he was real sensitive when anyone questioned him. So if he gets off to a bad start with the contract, with all the pressure that's been put on him, I could see him having a subpar season.
So what about Deshaun Watson? Just exploded last year and unfortunately got injured. Bounce back season for Deshaun Watson this year?
That's a guy, because we were talking about candidates for regression, and first of all, I love Deshaun Watson. He was my top-rated quarterback coming out of last year's draft, and what he did last year was darn impressive as a rookie. Just taking over, taking command of that offense, becoming a leader on, as a rookie of that team, sparking that offense, giving it some life. But unfortunately, he's one of my candidates for regression this year, and there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, he's coming off the ACL injury. I believe that injury happened week 8, week 9 last year. So, typically it takes a full year for them to recover, or to fully recover from those types of injuries. So that's one thing. Second thing is, the coaching staff for Texans did a great job, like I just mentioned, of scheming and game planning to Watson's strengths, right? So they didn't just run a basic vanilla or offense that Bill O'Brien was used to running throughout his career. I mean, he started doing a bunch of stuff that Deshaun Watson was doing at Clemson, and that took off. So what happens now is defensive coordinators have an all-off season to see what he did, to see how they prepared and they can game plan for what O'Brien was doing. So it's incumbent upon O'Brien to now, counteract their ability to stop them. So that's why I have Watson as a guy who might regress in terms of, overall production. Still, a quality starter, a guy that I believe, has a bright future in this league, but a guy that I see, not probably producing to what he's being projected to produce in a lot of these mock drafts and a lot of these, fantasy prognostications.
There's a guy who's not even on a team, and we're talking about Des Bryant. He's been kind of out there floating in the abyss for as long as I can remember. Reports that he's going to talk to the Browns this week. Where do you think he lands, and do you think he has any fantasy value if he lands in Cleveland?
If Des Bryant had any value to any team, he'd be on a roster right now. So that the fact that he hasn't signed anybody tells me that majority of the league's scouts don't think he has much left. He's talking about signing with Cleveland or signing. I forgot. I think the Ravens offered him a 3-year contract. He only wanted 1 year, and he turned it down. So, if whatever team he lands with, I mean, I don't see him being much of a contributor, to be honest with you. Especially if it's Cleveland, there's going to be so much question marks with that quarterback situation going into the season. So, that Des Bryant we knew and loved back with Dallas when he was, one of the best receivers in football. That's not happening anymore, in my opinion.
That's fair. And speaking of Dallas, they have a whole new wide receiving core. Who do you think is their leading receiver in Dallas?
You guys are going to be surprised, but I picked the rookie, Michael Gallup. So, this is a guy that they picked, I believe, is in the 3rd round. They got him. He might not be well known amongst, the non-draft gurus or draft, geeks like me, but his 2-year production at Colorado, he's 6'1", 205 pounds. I mean, he had 176 receptions, over, 2,500 yards and 21 touchdowns in just 2 seasons at Colorado State. So he's a kid that I know he's got a touchdown in his first game, I believe it was. So he's a kid that I was pretty high on in the mid to late rounds of the draft, a guy that he was even scouting possibly for the Bears. So he, just taking a wild guess, really. I just always go with the rookie, Michael Gallup.
And Alan Hearn's now on Dallas. I know he's been kind of...
Yeah, Alan Hearns is one of those guys that'll tease you, right? He'll have a big game a week, and then he'll disappear for 2 weeks. He'll come back out with another big game, and you're like, man, I had him on a bench. Then he's starting for the next 2 weeks, and he does absolutely nothing for you. So he's a guy that I can't trust. If I can't trust you, you're a backup to me, and you're a spot starter, and I only play you when I have matchups that are favorable.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I had Hearns last year. That was exactly the situation.
Now, albeit in fairness to Hearns, he's going into a better offensive system with a better quarterback, right? So we'll see how he does this year. But just going into the season, I just can't trust him. Like you said, I've been burned by him too many times.
Yeah, and we haven't done a whole lot of talking about kickers. And there's a bit of a kicking competition going on in Minnesota between Kai Forbath and Daniel Carlson. Do you think the rookie wins that out, or how do you think that plays out?
Well, that's going to be a tough one because, Kai Forbath is just a journeyman kicker, in my opinion. I know he had a solid season number-wise last year in terms of makes and misses, but he's just a guy that's on that traveling carousel of kickers that goes around to every NFL city, right? When you're missing a kicker or your kicker gets hurt, he's on that traveling carousel. So, but the fact that Minnesota is a team that is Super Bowl or bust this year, I can't see them going into a season with a rookie kicker. Even though Carlson was one of the top-rated kickers coming into the season last year, I just don't trust kickers coming in as rookies, right? So, because you got to be there in the NFL, you got to make kicks, in NFL stadiums against, hostile crowds, bad weather, so on and so forth. I just can't go into a season with a rookie kicker if your goal is Super Bowl or bust. So, because of that, I'm going to say Kai Forbath probably will be the kicker for the Vikings this season.
That's a great point. In Green Bay, they hardly ever use the tight end, Danny, but they got a guy that may be stupid not to use. I'm talking about Jimmy Graham.
Jimmy Graham.
Good season for him or no?
When I first heard the acquisition, the Packers made the acquisition of Jimmy Graham, I'm like, all right, that's going to be a very good pickup for them. But then I thought, looking into it, and Jimmy Graham, I know he had a bounce back year last year in Seattle, but he's obviously not the player he was when he was with the Saints in his heyday. He's always excelled when he's played on AstroTurf indoor, like with the Saints. Now he's going to be playing outside, cold weather. He's a Miami kid, on the grass. Plus, if you take a look, Aaron Rodgers really, hasn't utilized a tight end as much as you would think he had. I think the last tight end, if I'm not mistaken, he really used was the and the name John would blank, number 88. The kid got hurt.
Jermichael Finley?
I'm trying to blank on his name right now.
Jermichael Finley?
Yes, Jermichael Finley. I think he was the last guy that saw Rodgers really use or go to. Of course, he's had weapons on the outside like Jordy Nelson and other guys that he's relied on. So Jimmy Graham is a guy that obviously not in my top three, obviously not in my bottom three either. So he's a guy in the middle rounds there. That I would take a flyer on, but I'm not that high on Jimmy Graham. Are you guys high on Jimmy Graham?
I think he'll be overdrafted. He had 10 touchdowns last year, 8 or 10.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. He had a pretty good bounce back season, in Seattle. I don't know. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't love him this year either, guys. I think he's going to do well for you, but I don't think he's going to get what his draft position demands. There's way better guys out there. But again, if you need a tight end and he's there, there's a lot worse. You can do a lot worse than Jimmy Graham too. Sure.
And he plays in a high-powered offense, and he plays with a future Hall of Fame quarterback. So you can't beat that. So if you're in middle to late rounds and you need a tight end, he's out there. I'll grab him up. I'm not saying don't draft him. I'm just saying he's not. He's not really out there, but okay, I gotta get Jimmy Graham. I think he's having a great year. I just think the elements, playing on grass, Aaron Rodgers doesn't really use a tight end as much as you would think he does. So we'll see. But yeah, Jimmy Graham to me going into the season is not one of my top tight end targets.
I'd rather have Trey Burton.
Yeah, especially in PPR leagues. Yes.
Yeah. Are we buying the hype on Devontae Adams, Danny?
We buying the hype in terms of being a number one receiver. He's going to be a starter. He had a pretty good year last year. He was the only receiver that actually did well when Rodgers got hurt. He was catching passes from Hundley, and so yeah, I think you could go ahead and pencil him in as a quality starter. Is he top 4 or 5 round guy? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think he's a solid wide receiver too.
2 or 3. Some leagues if you start 3 receivers, probably even a flex. He might be a matchup guy. He's being paid like a top receiver, but I just don't see him as a guy I can feel comfortable penciling him in to my starting lineup week in and week out.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about rookies earlier. Who are some other rookies that you didn't talk about yet that you're kind of excited to see hit the field?
At any position or any specific positions, or
just guys off the top of your head that you think are going to be fantasy relevant that need to be on people's roster. This doesn't have to be any specific position.
Well, just some I can just think of right here are we might mention Mark Andrews from Baltimore, the tight end from Baltimore. I think he's eventually going to be the starter there. I think I've already mentioned Dante Pettis, the kid from Washington that the 49ers took in the second round. He was predominantly known, in college as a punt returner, but he's pretty good runner. He's got decent size, and he's a guy in that offense. I think is another guy who's a perfect fit for that offense. A kid that I like come out of college, but has some off-field issues, and it's already popped its head, during his short NFL career, is Antonio Callaway from Cleveland.
Yeah.
This kid had star potential coming out of Florida. Big play receiver, a guy who could take a 5-yard slant and take it all the way, as he did. I think it was last week in the preseason game. So he's a kid. If he can keep his head on straight, right, is a guy that Remember I was talking about earlier. If I can get him in later rounds of the draft, the guys who are coming off suspensions or guys who have some off the field issues, he's one of those guys that falls into that as well. Other receivers that I like. Speaking of the Packers, Jamar Moore, this kid out of Missouri, really caught my eye in the Senior Bowl when I was down there scouting the Senior Bowl. He's a guy who was a 4th-round pick, I think who's going to be coming on towards the end of the season. He's not going to be starting towards the beginning of part of the year. Might not even be active. Not even sure. But he's a guy that keep an eye on him. Traquan Smith, the kid out of UCF, another receiver, went in the third round to the Saints. He's a guy that I think he went into the perfect system. He's more quicker than fast receiver. He's not a guy who will blow the top off of defense, but he's a guy who knows how to get open, can make contested catches. And again, he plays for a head coach that will scheme and get him open. And, of course, plays with a Hall of Fame quarterback. So those are my receivers.
Sure.
Auden Tate, another kid from the Bengals, 7th-round pick. He's not a fast speed burner, but he's a big body guy. Against the Bears, he made a nice catch down the sideline. I think he went up between two defenders and caught the ball. He's a big play guy that way in terms of a size guy. Running back that I like, John Kelly from Tennessee, who went to the Rams. Of course, Todd Gurley is going to be the starter there, but he's a guy if you want to keep an eye on in case Gurley gets hurt. Maybe you can stash him or handcuff him. I don't even know where he's at currently on terms of the depth chart with the Rams. But he's a guy I like his running style. I think again he's another nice fit with the system that the Rams run as well. So those are some of the guys off the top of my head that I can think of rookie wise that I'll keep an eye on. Not guys that are big name, not guys that are go in the top half of most drafts, but guys you can probably stash away or pick up later on in a waiver wire that can make a difference for you. Winning in a week or possibly winning a playoff game. Who knows?
Yeah, that's really great insight.
Antonio Callaway.
Yeah, you guys watching Hard Knocks?
He's almost uncoverable.
Yeah, he looks really good on Hard Knocks. He got his ass chewed out this week by Hugh Jackson and company, and rightly so. But did you guys see the punishment that he got? They wouldn't let him come out.
Basically. Right.
And he had a huge game. I mean, the kid's got so much talent. He's just got to make sure he keeps things locked in when he's off the field.
Right. That's the thing about him. That's the only question. He didn't play all of last year. He was suspended for the majority of the season. So if he had played, this kid would have gone much higher than when he went in the 4th round, and he would have gone much higher. You're looking at a first or second round talent right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about the Chiefs' offense, Danny? I know they loaded up on deep threats, and they got a quarterback with a big arm. Do you see a lot of bombs being thrown by Patrick Mahomes?
I mean, he's got the arm strength, the arm talent to throw those bombs. He has to prove it to me. Coming out of Texas Tech, he ran an unconventional spread system. Typically quarterbacks coming out of that system haven't succeeded in the NFL. That's why I was shocked when the Chiefs went all the way up to number 10 to draft him in the 1st round, gave up all that draft capital. So he's got a lot to prove to me. But I'll tell you what, he's got one of the better quarterback coaches you can ever have in Andy Reid. So if anybody can bring out his natural talents, it's Andy Reid. But in terms of going in and relying on him to be a quality starter, I just can't do that. So that goes back to your question: are any of the Chiefs guys? Other than Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, really, Kareem Hunt, there's no one else really that sticks out for me. Sammy Watkins to me is a guy I had pegged as a superstar in the making coming out of Clemson. I'm really disappointed in the way his career has taken or has gone so far. So maybe he has a bounce back year, playing for the Chiefs. But other than Kareem Hunt and Travis Kelce and possibly Tyreek Hill later on in the rounds, those are the only Chiefs guys I'm looking at.
And John, I know you had some questions about sleepers. Do you want to highlight some of those guys that you were talking to me about earlier?
Well, I hate to mention the Raiders because I just think they're going to be terrible this year. But this is a kid from preseason action at camp. I'm talking about Ryan Switzer, who looks like a really good PPR slot receiver. And he was a monster with Mitch Trubisky at North Carolina, like 96 catches one season. He looks, kind of like their Anthony Miller. Any thoughts on Ryan Switzer?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. He's a little short receiver, a guy who can, line up in the slot. In terms of starting him, other than PPR league, maybe as a buy week fill in, I really don't see him as being a consistent contributor. But again, it's John Gruden, right? He's coming back and he's running his old West Coast offense, so God knows what he's going to do. But in terms of a sleeper, I don't have him really that high on my list of guys that I'm looking at.
And Amari Cooper bounce back this year?
He's going to be in a perfect system with a perfect coach, that's for sure. I mean, he's going to be in a West Coast system, running those, quick slants, quick hitters. He's got the ability to create separation at the top of the stem with his quickness. So, I mean, if he doesn't produce with John Gruden as his coach, I'm not sure Amari Cooper will ever produce. So, I like to have him being featured in the Raiders offense more so. And I like to have him have a bounce-back season, especially with Michael Crabtree now gone off to Baltimore.
So there's one guy I do like, rookie on the Panthers. And so I'm talking about DJ Moore, who looks pretty good in a little limited preseason action. This is a kid I was kind of high on coming out. Same school, Stephon Diggs, good route runner, really quick. What do you think of his fantasy outlook?
The guy that I still don't trust yet. I mean, he ran a limited amount of routes in college, so in Maryland. So the thing about him is he's more of a guy that catch a screen pass and take it all the way. So he's got that big play potential. So he's a guy that definitely is worth having on a roster in terms of relying on him. I have still to see more. Plus, with Cam Newton, at quarterback, and we talked about their backfield, Christian McCaffrey, and then as well as also Greg Olsen and some of their weapons there on offense. How much will he see in terms of early on? But definitely a guy I keep an eye on. A rookie that could surprise some people. And if he does, I don't know if he'll get drafted, but definitely a guy worth keeping an eye on in terms of one of those early season waiver wire pickups.
I'll tell you one guy I do like on Carolina. I still don't believe Christian McCaffrey is the guy carrying the load. They picked up C.J. Anderson, and as far as like draft value, I mean, you have to spend a big pick on Christian McCaffrey, but you could probably get like close to the same points for a lot later draft pick in C.J. Anderson. What do you think of? I think Ron Rivera is going to use C.J. Anderson quite a bit.
Right. I mean, we know what the Panthers are, right? They're a smash mouth, football team. Now I know they brought in North Turner this year as an offensive coordinator, but still, North Turner's success was with when he had running backs like with Emmitt Smith in Dallas, and so he's a guy that I think will rely on the run game, with Christian McCaffrey and C.J. Anderson, and then also throw it to the big guys outside with Devin Funchess, and we said Greg Olsen. Remember, they also picked up Torrey Smith too, so he's going to be a guy on the opposite side on the outside to stretch the field a little bit for them. So I do think that C.J. Anderson, if I had to pick between C.J. Anderson and DJ Moore, I'd definitely draft C.J. Anderson, and I'll wait on DJ Moore as a possible free agent pickup.
And Alshon Jeffrey looks like he's going to start on the pup list over in Philadelphia. Nelson Aguilar a little banged up too.
Nelson Aguilar proved a lot to me last year. He was a guy that was getting a lot of pressure from a first-round pick who really hadn't produced up until last year. But a guy that I like also in Philadelphia is a guy, Mike Wallace. He's a guy that is forgotten about. His heyday was with the Steelers, goes to the Ravens and gets lost there. Has a couple of big games, but really relies on it that much. But he's going to fill in that Torrey Smith role for the Eagles, a guy who still has some good speed, some deep speed. So I think Mike Wallace has some big play in him. Nelson Aguilar I think has some big play in him. So again, Alshon Jeffrey. I mean, he had a pretty good year last year, but we've seen this before in Chicago, right? Alshon with a shoulder injury, and so I can't rely on Alshon Jeffrey. He's just one guy that I just he's too up and down for me. He never has a consistent pace to a season. I can't rely on him week in and week out. So he's another one of those guys where prove it to me, Alshon.
Yeah. Prove it to us, Alshon. So Josh Gordon's still in kind of a treatment plan right now. People don't exactly know what's going on with Josh Gordon. Does he play at all this season, and does he have any value if he does play?
That's a good question, because I agree. It's some mystery around his. I mean, they say he's taking care of some stuff. The assumption is he's in rehab, or he's still trying to conquer his demons in terms of his substance abuse. So, man, if that kid ever gets together, he's one hell of a player. So the fact that he admitted that he played most of these games drunk or high or whatnot, and he still went out there and produced. I mean, that's the numbers he produced. I mean, that's pretty incredible. So imagine this kid was straight and sober and playing with with a clear mind and clear head. So that kid's a beast, man. He's so talented, and I'm rooting for him. Hopefully, he gets his life straight and gets back on the field. But man, missing a majority of the season, and now missing majority of his training camp. Again, another guy, if you want to get him in the later rounds, kind of stash him on your roster and see what happens. See if he comes back, but. It's so hard to rely on guys like that, especially if you're going to waste a mid to early round draft pick on him.
Yeah, monster talent. Great question, Joe. Now, the guy who'd be opposite him, Jarvis Landry, really excellent PPR receiver. With Gordon in there, you have to think Jarvis Landry takes a step back. And then, of course, you have Tyrod Taylor, who I've always liked as kind of a backup quarterback. Really great late-round backup quarterback. Tyrod looks to be having a good preseason as well. What do you think about Taylor and Landry?
Yeah, as far as Landry's concerned, I agree. He's a big play for PPR. I had him last year in my PPR league, and I think he averaged about 14 points a week for me, just strictly on catches, and once in a while he'd get into the end zone there. But if him and Tyrod Taylor, I'm not a big Tyrod Taylor fan, but what he does do, he doesn't turn the ball over. Coaches love him. He's pretty good in terms of in the red zone. He doesn't throw the dumb interceptions. So if he can get in sync with Jarvis and get him some touches early on and some scores, I could probably see Jarvis Landry as a guy you can probably draft and then probably take advantage of a hot start and probably trade him for something that you're lacking off. If you miss on a running back, for example, he's a guy that I don't know if I can count on production from him throughout the season. So he's a guy that if he gets, I'll definitely take him, get him if he gets off to a hot start, trade him, and then recoup something that you can use to strengthen your team in other parts.
Yeah, Jarvis Landry is always one of those guys in my league every year. He seems to get traded in fantasy more than any other player, and I think it's because he gets like 12 catches a game for like 17 yards.
Again, PPR, you got 13 points right there, right?
Right.
It's decent, production, but again, it's not superstar or number one receiver production.
Yeah, Landry's a beast. Have you watched Hard Knocks at all? I mean, he's such a character.
Yes. Yeah.
Bless him.
I haven't seen this past week's episode, but I heard he got into a fight. I don't know if that'll be on this week or he'll be on next week.
It'll be next week.
He got into a big fight. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked about a lot of different stuff here already. Obviously, on Bears Barroom, we love the Bears. What do you think about the Bears' defensive outlook for this year, and do you think that they're a fantasy-relevant defense?
Again, I know we kind of touched on the Bears' defense earlier on in this segment, but even though the Bears are a top 10 rated defense, they, in terms of fantasy, they don't give you that much, in terms of takeaways. And I know they had a number of sacks last year. I think it was 42. They finished at the end of last year. So, I think 3 of the top 5 sack producers are no longer on the team. So the big question mark coming into the season is who's going to be producing those sacks. Leonard Floyd in one half of football look pretty good, but he's got to be consistent. And in terms of opposite of him, who's going to be winning the position on the other side as far as outside linebacker. So in terms of sacks, you got to have some issues there, creating turnovers, and that's the thing that emphasis that defensive coordinator Vic Fangio has been stressing is he wants more turnovers this season. So, I love their safeties in Eddie Jackson and Adrian Amos. And in terms of Kyle Fuller and the other corner Prince McMorrow, guys who don't get many interceptions, but guys who can get the ball deflected and pop it up in the air. Hopefully the safeties come in or linebackers come in and get some interceptions. So in terms of solid every week, consistent play, I think you would take the Bears. But in terms of if you're looking for a team that produces that big play, pick six or fumble return for a touchdown, they're kind of middle of the pack for me right now.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely a team that obviously it's very draftable defense and a team that wouldn't mind. Now the other thing is Tariq Cohen is he going to have a bigger role on special teams this year? They got a new special teams coordinator. Is he still going to be the primary punt returner? I'm assuming he is. Is he going to be used in kickoff returns? Is it going to be Benny Cunningham? Are they going to go with Anthony Miller? What are they going to do in terms of kickoff? Who's going to be the primary returner? So some question marks there. But if you're looking for a solid week in and week out play on defense, I think you can't go wrong with the Bears. Just if you're looking for that big jump like you saw last year with the Jaguars or possibly this year with the Chargers, I don't know if the Bears yet have proven that they can be that type of a defense. Mm-hmm. But definitely a solid unit overall.
What do you think about the Patriots defense? Now they have a pretty easy schedule, and three kind of bum teams in their division that they'll play 6 times a year. I'm kind of high on the Patriots defense. Another one, New Orleans, I like too, with a great secondary and a good pass rush. But what do you think about those two defenses?
Interesting. So Patriots, obviously they lost their defensive coordinator, Matt Patricia, who's now coaching the Detroit Lions. Those guys as well. I mean, they never have, once they traded Chandler Jones, they really haven't had a big time sack producer. Now I know they're getting back some players in terms of from injury. Dante Hightower is coming back this year. I think Kyle Van Noy was injured from, if not most of last year, a pretty good chunk of it. So, they got some questions for me in terms of their secondary. Eric Rowe is going to take over the starting cornerback position now with Malcolm Butler gone. Patrick Chung and Devin McCourty haven't really been big play safeties in terms of fantasy, right? In terms of, creating turnovers or returning balls, for touchdowns. So, but what happens with the Patriots year in, year out, right? They're always solid. They always end up being, top half of the league in terms of, points allowed. And so if you're in a format where you get credit for points allowed or yards allowed or so on and so forth, I think they're a solid team. But again, a step below the Bears, definitely for me in my rankings, but a middle of the pack defense if I had to go in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, do you have any other questions you want to ask Danny? I have one that I'd like to end with, and I know that we've already taken well over an hour of Danny's time, which we're very appreciative of. John, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
So when it gets to football, I just keep talking. I don't say anything, so sorry.
I love it.
No, we love it, man. We absolutely love it.
Yeah, for sure. One quick question. How long before Shady McCoy's legs fall off, Danny?
Shady McCoy, that's another guy that I have on my guy I expected to digress, production-wise this season. I think he's already 30 years old, and as we all know, 30 is that cliff, right, that barometer where usually running backs fall off. Plus, he's coming off this offseason, off-the-field turmoil that has yet to be resolved. So, will he be suspended? Will he not be suspended? We don't know. And then, other thing we can't forget about is, he lost 3 out of his 5 starting offensive linemen going into the season. So Richie Incognito is gone, Gordy Glenn is gone, and Eric Wood is gone, right? And he's dealing with, 2 unproven quarterbacks, actually 3. A.J. McCarron, the rookie Josh Allen, and then Nathan Peterman. So, if I'm a defense and I'm going to be stacking, the box against, to stop the run against Buffalo and have one of those quarterbacks prove to me that they could beat me through the air and that they can block and open up lanes for Shady McCoy. So, and that's not even talking about his off the field stuff, whether he gets cleared, whether NFL suspends him, because even if he gets cleared in the courts, NFL can still come in and suspend him for a game or 2 or whatever. So, a lot of things going around with Shady McCoy. So he's another guy that I expect to regress in terms of what he produced last year. And definitely a guy that I don't know if I would trust much going into most of my fantasy drafts.
Yeah, I believe he was sued officially this week by his ex-girlfriend, saying that he hired some guys to go beat her up and rob her. So there's a lot left in that saga. Keep your eyes peeled, but definitely a possible suspension candidate. So something you got to keep in mind with that high draft pick.
Real quick, Danny, are there guys that you cross off your list, like in a real draft, like a red flag? There's guys you won't touch to keep pull off the board.
Going into this draft, are there guys that I've marked off my board? In terms of just on-field play, possible suspension, or are we just talking about?
Yeah, character issues, maybe possible suspension, or just about to fall off the cliff like McCoy.
Well, I mean, McCoy is one guy that we're kind of going over here, but another guy that I don't want to say I've crossed him off my list, but a guy that I do not trust and I don't think he's all that he's being hyped up to be, and that's Jared Goff. I think last year he had a pretty good year because a lot of things that Sean McVay was doing was a lot of quick hitters, getting the ball in timing, rhythm, getting into the hand of his playmakers. But I don't think he's going to produce what he produced last year, which was 28 touchdowns and only 7 interceptions. That team spent a lot of money this offseason. but they spent a lot of it on the defensive side. The one exception being, re-signing Todd Gurley for the big extension, and also getting Brandon Cooks. But that's the one guy that I see also not producing. Going into the season, I just do not trust him as a guy I would, pencil in as my starting quarterback.
Right, because the defense should give him a lot of extra chances too.
But also another thing about that defense is they have a lot of talent, but they have a lot of volatile talent. That defense can easily just self-destruct with guys like Ndamukong Suh, with Marcus Peters, Aqib Talib. Aaron Donald hasn't gotten paid yet. He hasn't come into camp yet? Is he gonna miss games? So there's a lot going on there, and it's got a chance to be phenomenal, but also has a chance to blow up in their faces. So that's another team that it's got my curiosity, and I'm definitely going to watch their games. So I want to see what's going to happen there. But Jared Goff is a guy I just don't trust. And last year, he was off to a great start, and he was doing well, and everybody kept saying Jared Goff. I'm like, Jared Goff, I don't trust him. He had a great year, and I'll give it to him. But man, he's got to prove it to me again.
And Danny, I've got one big one for the very end that I'm been kind of stewing on for a little while, and he's a guy everyone's really talking about in Saquon Barkley. Is this guy the real deal? Is he worth a top 5 pick? And do you envision him having success in his first year with the Giants?
Good question. Is he worth a top 5 pick? Now, are we talking standard format? Are we talking PPR?
In PPR, is he worth it? And then also in standard, is he worth it?
Top 5, off the top of my head here, I got Gurley, Bell, Ezekiel Elliott. Trying to think of my other running backs that I listed up here as my top 5. But man, to come in and say a rookie's going to be a top 5 pick in a fantasy football draft, and don't forget he's got talented players on that offense. He's got talented receivers. He's got a talented tight end that I like a lot. To name him a top David, to name him a top 5 running back. David Johnson's also a guy. I forgot he's coming back from injury. We've got Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, Melvin Gordon. Dalvin Cook is a guy I think can come back and can be a top 10 talent.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't talked about Jordan Howard. Man, Saquon. That's a good question. Top 5, I'd say no. Top 5, I'd say no.
Okay.
I'd say if you're definitely late first round, second round, especially if you're in a PPR. But the thing about Saquon Barkley is and I was opposed to the Giants taking on number 2 because I felt there was a better player available there.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand the reasoning. I mean, the Giants haven't had a running game in God knows how long. But so I know why they took him. But he's got that big play potential. But he also has the potential to get stuffed, for minus 3 yards and have 12 carries for 17 yards, in a game. So he's got he's a 233-pound running back who at times plays like a 217-pound running back. If that makes any sense,
Yeah.
So he tries to dance a lot, and he's a guy who's got the big powerful base. Just follow your blockers, trust your lead blockers, and go the whole hard. There are times he tries to get cute, he tries to dance and loses yards. So stuff like that I don't like about him. This is coming out of college. So I'd say right now as a rookie, I would not say no top 5, but definitely he's got the potential to be a top 5 running back, especially if you're talking about PPR. But going into this season as a rookie, I'd say lower half of the first round, definitely second round talent.
That's going to be hard to lay off him once Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott, David Johnson, and Todd Gurley all come off the board. But you're
right. Well, then, what about Kareem Hunt? What about Melvin Gordon? What about Leonard Fournette? What about Dalvin Cook? What about Jordan Howard? These guys. It's like, do you take them all ahead of him? So it's a debate, right? So you're gonna have to go after and say,
great point.
Do I want to trust this rookie to do this? Yeah, second overall pick in the draft. Typically those guys are pretty good fantasy players, but there are some that don't produce as expected in the first year. So plus he's also a guy who's in my opinion tightly wound. So he's always a calf pull or a hamstring away from being out for a couple of weeks too. So, but again, it's football.
Sure.
Injuries always happen. You cannot predict that. So, but you can set up any running back, to be honest with you.
Speaking of injury, real quick, Joe, he fired his rifle recently. Danny, I'm talking about Andrew Luck. Is he a good pick this year, coming back off of missing all of last year?
Did you guys watch that game that he played, the preseason game?
Yeah, I did.
Didn't it look like he was kind of favoring his throwing shoulder? I mean, his motion didn't look right.
He looked a little off. Yeah, he performed well, but he was, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah, so it's like, I know he's coming off a major injury, and shoulder injuries, especially to the throwing shoulder, are big things for quarterbacks. So, are we talking about relying on him as a starter? No, but I would definitely draft him, put him as a backup, take a chance on him as recapturing some of that fantasy magic that he had a couple years ago. But going into the season, I don't think I can rely on Andrew Luck as a backup. He's again a guy who's just we know he's a talent, we know he's got the brains, we know he has the ability. It's just a matter of, is that shoulder healthy enough to be able to produce week in and week out, and not only that, but take those big hits that he's going to end up taking.
Yeah.
So I hate to put you on the spot, but Bears Barroom listeners are going to want to know what you think of Mitch Trubisky's fantasy season outlook.
Mitchell Trubisky, he's a guy that I'm still up in the air on in terms of, for me, just scouting him coming out of college. Obviously, there wasn't much to go on other than the 12 or 13 starts he had in North Carolina. So what he did last year, he definitely showed me some things that I liked, which is accuracy on the run. He's got the arm talent, meaning he can get the ball into tight coverage, squeeze it in between two or three defenders. But the thing I want to see Trubisky prove to me is accuracy and his ability to process defenses within the pocket. If he can progress in that area, which also goes hand in hand with, in terms of his accuracy, cleaning up his footwork, being able to follow through on his throws, going through his progression and making the right reads, and hopefully the new coaching staff can get that out of him. Because last year's coaching staff, and I'm on record as saying Dowell Loggins is probably one of the worst offensive coordinators I've ever seen. And that's saying a lot. I mean, we had John Shoup here. We've had other, we have Gary Crowton here in Chicago. So we've had some pretty bad offensive coordinators here in Chicago. But, Dowell Loggins, I felt like, I think he was just playing Madden with his play call sheet, because he would never set up a play. He would just go, all right, let's go page 2, D here. There was one play would never help set up another play. And then as you can, talking to these offensive geniuses, these offensive minds, they're always thinking 2-3 plays ahead when they call a play. A play might lose 2 or 3 yards, but that was intentionally called to set up the next 2-3 plays. So I feel like Dowell Loggins didn't do that. And I feel like Coach Nagy can do that. So it's developing him, getting him to progress, especially from the pocket, is where I like to see Trubisky excel or grow this year. Can he do it? Man, all eyes are on him. I'm definitely rooting for him. It's something that he's a guy that I'm definitely we'll be watching with a keen sense of urgency here to see how he develops. But are you thinking like he's going to be drafted as a starter? Are you talking just strictly backup? Or are you talking about a guy who's going to explore kind of like Jared Goff did last year? Is that what you're kind of referencing?
Yeah, just is he fantasy viable?
Yes. Is he fantasy viable? Yes. Early on, I would say I don't know. I don't think so. But he's a guy that definitely, if he's available in your leagues on a waiver wire, especially, keep an eye on him, because if that week 1, week 2, we were talking about earlier, you build momentum, right? If the offense starts clicking early on, he's going to get better and better and better. So I definitely expect Trubisky to be better towards the end of the season, come playoff time, fantasy playoff time, and so on and so forth, than I expect him to be week 1 and week 2 of the season.
All right.
Awesome. Well, we worked our way through a whole lot of talk here.
Yeah, it was an hour and a half.
Yeah, Danny, thank you so much.
For like 15 minutes, it was just keep going through all this stuff. So.
But yeah, Danny, thank you so much for your time. For everyone listening out there, where can everyone find you on Twitter?
I can be found at DShimon56, DSHIMON 56.
Awesome. And again, thank you so much for being with us in our draft strategy episode. It was awesome having you. We both, John and I, can't wait to go against you in the draft on Saturday. That should be an absolute blast.
Yeah, hopefully you're going to be at Soldier Field. It's going to be
I'm
something
still
going
trying
on
to
the
work
field.
out logistics with babysitting and all that
Right.
stuff. But yeah, I'm definitely going to try and make it down there.
Nice.
Yeah, and for everyone else listening, thank you everyone for tuning in. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at FFBGoon and on Instagram, and then like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple, and SoundCloud. John, Mr. Tooch, thank you for joining me as always, my friend.
Oh, it was great to get my fantasy nerd on.
Oh, love it, man. It's living the dream. And as always with fantasy season, God bless America, God bless football, and let's kick some ass. See you guys next time.